Hello guys, welcome to another session on answer writing. So here we will look at a question which are related to hypothesis and then we will look at the answer also. So as you see here, this is a question that you have which is related to hypothesis. Okay, so hypothesis is a statement of the relationship between two or more variables. We know that. Elucidate by giving examples of poverty and illiteracy. So we need to consider poverty, illiteracy as two variables, and then we will be, answering this question. So define hypothesis first. That's the structure, and define what are variables, and then relate hypothesis and variables using what is given. That is poverty, illiteracy, and then you need to conclude. Guys, it's a very simple question. In fact, this is an example that we have actually discussed when we discussed about hypothesis. So it's a pretty straightforward question. I don't think that you'll be facing any problem with respect to this. So let me quickly go through the answer here rather than discussing, the complete topic as such. So you can say, hypothesis is a proposition or assumption that establishes a relation between two or more variables. That's how you'll define, right? And you can give the actual definition that we have learned that a G.A. Lundberg defines what is hypothesis. Just write that. It's a tentative generalization and the validity of which remains to be tested. That's a standard definition we always write about hypothesis, the Lundberg definition. And then in sociology, hypotheses form the basis of research, and that will actually enable the exploration of causation in a social phenomena, right? So, and this relationship between variable actually provide the clarity, focus, and the direction to sociological investigation. So briefly talk about this, and then you can go to defining variables. What are variables? Like you keep X, right, when you studied math. The same thing, variables are measurable attributes or properties that vary across time, space, or individual. Why we keep X for variable? Because that keep on varying based on time, space. Now here it is individual because it's subjective when it comes to sociology. And they are central to the hypothesis formulation as they represent the phenomena which is going to be studied. And when we talk about variable, you need to talk about independent variable, dependent variable. And we will take two different scenarios. Poverty acting as independent variable and dependent variable. Illiteracy acting as dependent and independent variable. So we'll talk about two different scenarios. So independent variable means the variable presumed to cause changes in another variable. That's independent. Dependent variable means the variable whose outcome depends on changes in the independent variable. So just like the dependent and independent sentence we talk about. Now, for example, illiteracy you consider as an independent variable that influence poverty. That is dependent variable. Conversely, you can say poverty, independent variable, that influence illiteracy, dependent variable. So if you don't have knowledge, if you are illiterate, it lead to poverty, one way you can say. And if you are poor, that lead to illiteracy also. You cannot get access to education. So this way, both act as independent, dependent variables. And we have discussed that relation. This is exactly the example that actually I have given to you during our actual class, and you can look at the PDF also to get the most details. So now let's discuss the same example that I've given. You can now relate both, right, hypothesis and the variables using this poverty and illiteracy as asked in the question. So basically what the hypothesis will do, they connect the variable by proposing their causal or correlational relationship. So if you look at the context of poverty and illiteracy, we can look at two hypotheses. Let's start with the first hypothesis, that is high literacy lead to poverty. High illiteracy lead to poverty, right? 1 minute, guys. So what's the first hypothesis? High illiteracy lead to poverty or lack of education that lead to poverty. Second hypothesis that we'll discuss is poverty also lead to high illiteracy because you don't have access. Now, when you take the first hypothesis, that is high illiteracy that lead to poverty. So what's the independent variable here? Illiteracy, right? What is the dependent variable? Poverty. So here poverty depends on illiteracy. High illiteracy, that is the reason for poverty. So if you see illiterate individual, they often lack skills and qualification which is required for better paying jobs. So what does that effectively mean? That these people will be confined to unskilled task and they automatically become poor. So that is because of illiteracy. And illiterate parents may not emphasize their children's education. That again perpetuate the cycle of poverty. And then functional illiteracy, the lack of understanding of modern tools and technologies, that also exclude the individuals from various economic opportunities that will again create poverty traps. For instance, if you see in India, illiteracy among the rural communities, that often hinders access to government schemes and welfare program, that again reinforcing the poverty. So that's how you connect that illiteracy lead to poverty. So here independent variable is illiteracy, dependent variable is poverty, because poverty here depends upon illiteracy. Now reverse it. Second hypothesis, poverty lead to illiteracy or poverty leads to high illiteracy. So here independent variable now poverty, because poverty lead to illiteracy, dependent variable illiteracy. So here illiteracy depends upon poverty. Earlier poverty was depending upon illiteracy, right? So both are discussed already. So how this is, you can explain. That's very simple, right? Poverty forces children to drop out of school to contribute to family income. That's what expected from, poor family. Malnutrition and poor living condition that impact the cognitive abilities that will affect the educational performance of the children. And poor family may lack access to quality education infrastructure that again result in higher dropout rates. For example, the marginalized communities in India, they struggle with limited access to schools, especially tribal area, rural area, the backward regions like that. So that's how you can talk about that second hypothesis. So first one, high illiteracy lead to poverty. Then poverty lead to high illiteracy. So we have combined both, how the variables and everything is used, how independent variable become dependent variable, how dependent variable become independent variable. All these we discussed, two scenarios we discussed. And if you want to talk about the other sociological perspective here, you can talk about Oscar Lewis culture of poverty, since the question connecting poverty. So poverty is not an individual failure, but a result of socio-cultural environment where the survival need to overshadow the educational aspirations. Oscar Lewis, cultural poverty, and that cycle you can discuss. Then Gunnar Myrdal, poverty persists due to inadequate institutional support, including lack of access to affordable education. Durkheim, functionalism, you can discuss. Education is the key social institution for transmitting values and the skills. And lack of education due to the poverty actually disrupt this function, and that's affecting the societal stability. So you can use the functionalist perspective to explain that. Again, multi-dimensional poverty. So poverty encompasses not only economic deprivation, but also lack of access to education, health, social capital. So that you can talk about the multi-dimensionality of poverty. Right? Now, you talk about the application of hypothesis in sociological research, both in quantitative and in qualitative analysis. So if you talk about quantitative analysis, measuring the correlation between poverty and illiteracy rates using national surveys like NSSO census data example, you can give. So tracking literacy improvements under various schemes like Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and all. So again, using quantitative analysis. Qualitative, if you need to discuss, exploring how illiteracy impact the individual decision making and access to resources. So this is again more deeper understanding. The ethnographic studies in tribal communities where poverty hinders access to education. Right, as an example, we discussed a lot about all these, so that's why I'm getting going faster, because all these things are already covered, guys. This is a revision session. So how will you conclude now this? The relation between poverty and illiteracy, in fact, exemplify the interplay of independent and dependent variable as we discussed. Each influence the other, and that creates cyclical relation and that perpetuate the socio-economic inequalities. So poverty restrict access to education, but illiteracy limit opportunities for upward mobility. That again creating a chicken and egg problem. You don't know which came first, chicken or egg, right? Similarly, illiteracy and poverty, it's a cycle, right? So sociological research, what they're trying to do, they're trying to, or through the formulation and testing of hypothesis, playing a very critical and important role in understanding and addressing this interconnected cyclical issues, and trying to give a solution or paving the way for more inclusive policies and the programs. So that's all what you need to write about this. So I hope we have discussed what is actually asked in the question, which we have connected with the variables, independent variable, dependent variable, both examples, what they have given, we discussed, both hypotheses we have discussed. So guys, that's about this answer. And if you like the video, share it with your friends. If you're looking for any mentorship on sociology, test series for mains and then courses, check out the details in the description. So see you in the next video. Thank you so much.